I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're all meeting on Aboriginal land this evening. I'm sitting on the land of the Wongal and the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respect to elders past, present, and also those amongst us at the moment. I'd like to acknowledge their traditional custodianship, their ongoing custodianship of the waterways and the lands and the plants and the animals, everything that we know and we call home. And I'd like to thank them for their patience and their resilience as we move forward towards a future which is inclusive and full of healing. I'd like to welcome everyone here to the third Meet the Artist talk. And this is the end of our first week of this series, which is a focus on music. In particular, I've had a little bit of a bent on composers. My name is Augusta Supple and I am a board member of the Women's Club, and I'm your host this evening. Just to let you know, the Meet the Artist initiative has been created to really provide visibility and an opportunity to connect with artists during these very unpredictable and trying times for all of us. The aim is really to celebrate their contribution to our cultural life, to hear a little bit more about their thoughts on their career, what's led them here in their practice. And I'd like to thank the Women's Club and the members for the support of these artists through this program. In particular, I'd like to thank my co-convener, Virginia Gordon, for all her support and co-conspiracy on this series. Tonight, we meet the artist, trumpeter, flugelhornist, composer, and actually just wonderful person, Nadje Noordhuis. Nadje has been described as one of the most compelling voices to emerge on her instrument in recent years. She's an Australian-born, New York-based trumpeter and composer, and she possesses one of the most unforgettably lyrical voices in modern music. Her deeply felt clarion tone and evocative compositional gift meld classical rigor, jazz expression, and world music accents into a sound that is distinctly her own. For many of us at the Women's Club who got to experience Nadje's beautiful concert as a part of celebrating International Jazz Day on the 30th of April this year, you'll know what I'm talking about. Her bio paints a picture that she was also one of the 10 semi-finalists in the 2007 Thelonious Monk International Jazz Trumpet Competition and was selected as a Carnegie Hall Young Artist in 2010. Based in New York since 2003, she's a member of multiple Grammy Award-winning Maria Schneider Orchestra, Grammy-nominated Darcy James Argues Secret Society, and the Grammy-nominated Anat Cohen Tenet. She has 3 albums of original compositions on her record label, Little Mystery Records, with the 4th album releasing in September. Her jazz debut quintet album featuring Grammy nominees Sarah Caswell and Jeffrey Keezer was released to critical acclaim in 2012. Her 2015 contemplative duo album of miniatures with pianist Luke Howard Tensales has garnered much international attention with multi-million streams on Spotify and YouTube. Her 2017 album with vibraphonist synthesist James Shipp, Indigo, was premiered at the Wangaratta Jazz Festival in Australia. She has a genre-bending quintet with Maeve Gilchrist, Jesse Lewis, Ike Stern, and James Shipp, and she coolly blends acoustic and electric instruments, seamlessly weaving her melodious compositions and threads of improvisation. She has done many things. As I said, there's a new album coming out in September, but I wanted to also let you know that she's got support from the Chamber Music America Performance Plus grant, and that's what is currently supporting her very busy schedule in the sort of pre-release phase of her next album. So welcome, Nadje. Thank you
so much
for coming along tonight.
My pleasure.
It's
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Look, it's so wonderful to have a conversation with you, because usually we're in a dark jazz venue together, you know, sort of listening closely to what's going on. And
It's hard to have a chat.
it's a different kind of chat. So I'm glad, even though we're isolated, we're together this evening. And I just wanted to say thank you for your time, because I know it's a long day for you usually.
You're most welcome.
So Nadje, every superhero has an origin story. And as a superhero of the trumpet and the, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about yours. Where did you start, and how have you built this career and this life for yourself?
It's well, I'm actually in my childhood home as we speak, which is obviously something that I was never expecting all these years later to be back here. Yeah, raised in North Bargala on the northern beaches, and yeah, I had just had a very supportive family. I was very lucky, and they recognized that I really loved music at a young age. So we had a piano in the house, and so I crawled up and started playing. And then the next thing, my mum enrolls me in piano lessons, and so I was really very very young at the time. So I studied classical piano, and then uh, when I was going into primary school, I had the option of playing a band instrument, and so my pianist teacher's husband played trumpet, so I was like, I'll play trumpet. And the first time I picked it up, I played like a C scale, like I worked it out. I'm like, oh, this is easy. Like you just gotta read like one. You don't have to read like treble clef and bass clef at the same. It's just read treble clef. I'm like, this is easy. And I mean, those notes that I learned in the first 10 minutes of playing really sort of sustained me for a good 4 years of primary school band. But then I also did like I sort of improved quite quickly because I had such an incredible start with the piano playing. So I was in community bands. So I was 8 and everyone else is 16, 17.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just sort of like a very privileged, very wonderful way to grow up. And so I went to Forest High, and there was a great band program there. So I was in all the stage bands and the concert bands and vocal ensemble. And yeah, so, but weirdly, it didn't sort of occur to me that this was something that I could do as a profession. Like, it was always like, you should do something with a bit of security.
Ah, so
Yes.
so with that idea that you should do something with a bit of security, what were your options? What were you looking at? What were
Well,
your options, Nadje?
I thought, well, I mean, obviously I love music, but I loved all music. It wasn't like I really love jazz. Like that wasn't really a thing I was into. I really love rock and metal, and but I could play classical piano, so I could, it was just like I just love music. So I thought, well, if performing is a bad idea, then maybe I should be on the other side, and maybe if I do sound engineering and get into that side of things. So I did a degree. So when I left high school, I moved to Lismore, and I went and studied sound engineering and music industry skills. So it wasn't until, I mean, I didn't take my trumpet with me. Like it was just really not something that I sort of considered. But I'd been up in Lismore for 6 months, and I was quite shy. So after 6 months, there was a sign up for like a vocalist wanted somebody to play on their recital. There's a contemporary music program up there, so I thought, oh, it's a really really good way to meet people. Maybe I'll actually talk to someone this year. So so I got my trumpet sent up, and then all of a sudden, boom! I'm like the trumpet player of Lismore. I mean, I'm literally the only one, so it wasn't
Yeah.
there wasn't much competition. But I mean, I just had all the gigs, so I was in, I got asked to be in a funk band, and we toured around, and I'd played on 45 recitals in the 2 years that I was there before I transferred back to the School of Audio Engineering in Sydney. So it was just sort of this whirlwind, like really unexpected. But at the whole time, I'm like, but I'm not a trumpet player, I'm an engineer, so it was just sort of
So how long did it take before the actual label of engineer to just slough off you, and you finally embrace the fact that clearly you're a trumpet player.
Right. Well, if I'm going to be, completely honest, which I will be, this is what I do. There's no filter anymore. I don't know where it went, but it's gone. Um, but I had a really hard time trying to get a job in the sound engineering field. No one would hire me, and the only job that I got was distributing radio commercials at night in the Cross. so so I did that for 18 months, and my career path was to eventually get a job in a studio that just did the music for like Qantas.
Oh,
And then maybe after that, then I could get, like, it was this, I'm like, it's going to take me like 10 years to get a job in a studio, but I'm like, this is all that's available. But I actually got fired from that job
oh,
for being female.
oh, did you?
I did. I
Oh,
mean,
wow. How did they break that to you?
well, it's weird because you think that they would have noticed when they hired me.
Yeah, yeah.
But basically they said, that because the main producer was leaving and there was a delay, and they're like, well, actually, the people on the board don't think that a woman can run the studio, so we're firing you and replacing you with a man.
Oh, well,
So
at least they dropped their filter for that occasion.
like the manager was blunt. So this is exactly what happened. It's like they didn't know I had a degree in it. I think they just thought that I sort of like,
You're just a floozy.
Wandered in from the tea room, like,
Yeah, whoops.
Whoops. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Go back to the kitchen. So as you can imagine, I was very cranky, because this just clearly wasn't happening. And so I went to my friend's place for coffee and cake, as one does after getting fired for your gender. And she said, well, why don't you move to Melbourne and study improv? And I was like, that's a great idea. Oh, I'll move in a month. So that's exactly what I did. It was like a month to the day. I just left.
You decided, I'll just move to Melbourne?
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't actually played the trumpet in probably like 18 months at that point. So I just packed up my car and left, and I'd never been to Melbourne. And I moved 7 months before the audition. So it's really just as well that I got in. So I went to the Victorian College of the Arts, which was amazing for me. Like, really, it was just so free and open and embracing, and I was very, very lucky.
And how was the gender parity there? Really, was it, still quite a male dominated?
Absolutely.
Oh.
Yeah. Actually, right, there was 20 people in my year, and I think there was 4 or 5 women. So one in 4. So that, unfortunately, that statistic would be amazing now. And in some cases that is still 20 years on, that's still about the statistic, but there's some schools that are less than that, which I think is not very good.
No, it's not very good. Yeah. So after that occasion, you in 2003 you moved to New York. Was it another coffee and cake inspired adventure?
It kind of was. My Life in Cake by Nadje Noordhuis.
That's right. Career choices made by a cake. Yes. Watch out for the tiramisu.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I actually, I'd been in school for so long, and I was about to do my honours year at BCA, and I was just venting to my sister. I'm like, I really want to travel. I want to like do something with my life, and I really want to go to New York. And she goes, well, let me just check, and at that, those years you call up the travel agent.
Mm-hmm.
And then she comes back and she's like, I booked you a ticket. You're going in like 3 days.
Wow.
So she goes, and I'm coming with you. So we went to New York for 3 weeks, and it was just, it's a long story, but it was just this crazy serendipitous series of events, just sort of meeting these people, and like meeting an Australian pianist who I just met on a session just the once. I met her and then had a session and then sat in at her gig. And then the drummer, who ended up being Beyonce's drummer for years, like invited me to her gig. And then at that gig, I met this other sax player. He's like, you should go to Manhattan School and do your master's. And I laughed at him, but I ended up like going to speak to the dean, and I just sort of walked in and I just got the shivers, I was like, oh, I'm going to go here. So it was this 18-month absolutely bonkers plan, like of scholarships and traveling to Amsterdam to do a course, to meet someone and play and do that whole thing. It was bananas. Like, it doesn't, on paper you just be like, there are some pieces
You look at it and you just go, where's the job security here?
Yeah, exactly. You're just like, this is just absolutely bananas. Like, this doesn't make any sense at all. So, but yeah, but it actually worked out. And it's funny now because the saxophone player that had said to me, you know, you should come to Manhattan School, I see him all the time, you know, just like he plays a lot of Broadway and stuff. And I am always like, it's your fault, you know. He's like, I'm sorry. So, you know, it's funny like that 20 years on, we're still sort of connected. I'm like, had you not had that conversation with me, I wouldn't have moved there. This whole adventure wouldn't have happened. So it's weird looking back and just seeing just one little piece, just one little conversation can just make this most enormous difference in someone's life.
It's an amazing story, and I kind of love it because it's also about these kind of giant leaps of faith, in a way of just going, oh, guess I'm going to Melbourne, I guess I'm going to New York.
Yeah.
So it just so happens that while you're in New York, you're also a member of the Grammy Award-winning Maria Schneider Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
She's one of the great ladies of contemporary jazz, really, isn't she?
Yes, she's top of the tree, to be honest. There's no one above her.
That's pretty amazing. So can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a trumpet player in a Grammy Award-winning orchestra, and what it's just like playing in an orchestra when you've also got this sort of solo practice? But really, what does that mean, and what's that life look like?
It was funny because when I was in Australia, I didn't really play a lot of big band work. It was really just in my high school that I'd played big band, and then I'd stopped in, like, you know, when I was 14 or 15. So there'd been a big gap of 10 or so years. But when I got to the States, it was you know, and it took a while, but I ended up getting work with the Diva Jazz Orchestra, which is an all-female orchestra. Basically, the only people that hired me for the first few years were women. So you know, they really took me under their wing, and they signed my visa papers, and they're very, very, very generous. You know, but I sort of like cut my teeth. That's the expression, right? Yeah. So I, you know, I really learned that, you know, perhaps I needed to brush up on some things and not be so approximate, you know, in my reading. I was a little bit laid back. So, and then I just got more work as an ensemble player. And it was funny because everything I learned, you know, at high school, like, just carried right through, like, you know. And so then people were like, oh, this is something, you know, that you are good at. And I'm like, well, I had this amazing training, just bizarrely enough, you know, when I was a kid. So I would go to see Maria's band. She has a residency at this club called the Jazz Standard, which unfortunately just shut down last year. But you know, every like Thanksgiving week in November, she would be playing, and I would be listening, and I'm just like, I love this band so much. Like, I want to be in it. And so every year, like, I had to do this whole like New Year sort of goals list. What do I want? And I just like throw out just the most ridiculous, impossible things on it. So it was always like, you know, I want to play the Village Vanguard. I want to, you know, play with Maria Schneider. I want to record an album. I want to just do all this. Like, just put it out there, because I learned that crazy stuff happens if you just sort of put it out there and sort of just, you know, pay attention and see where it heads, and just sort of, you know, blindly go forth. Yeah, so it took a really long time. Yeah, I'd been writing down I want to play in Maria's band since 2003, and she called me in 2015, you know.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was.
That's some patience you've got there. That's some stubborn goals.
Yeah. I mean, I'd sort of given up at this point because I knew, like, random people had recommended me for like literally a decade. You know, but usually people, if she has a gig, like, everyone's available. Like, you don't turn those gigs down. So it was always, you know, like, it would be close to impossible to just sort of pick up a gig with her. You would have to have done a rehearsal, but rehearsals only happen every couple of years when there's like a project or a new album coming. So it was just like this timing issue. But one thing is that, which is like probably the most deeply felt part of it is that my teacher was the late Laurie Frink, who was this incredible brass guru in New York, and people from all over the world, like, and just like big names, whenever they would have problems, they would end up, you know, in Laurie's studio. So she was the third trumpet player in Maria's band since the beginning, like 27 years ago. You know, but she unfortunately passed away from cancer in 2013. So that's the chair that I play. So I still see her handwriting, you know. Yeah, it's sort of deep, you know. So it's just like this lineage.
This beautiful legacy and lineage of
and
passing it on.
Yeah, and because Maria writes, I mean, she writes for everybody in the band. Like, she, you know, she has those sounds in their heads, and so with Laurie, she would. The third book is just like all these beautiful inner voices and stuff. So it's like I know how to like put my sound behind it, you know, and carry through, and I can just see like her just grinning, you know. And I'm just like I, you know, it's a beautiful moment.
Oh, that's so magical to have that sort of connection as well.
Yeah.
So moving on to your more sort of like, I guess, partnership focus, which you've done an album, as I said, with James Shipp, but I'm really curious about your work that you've done with Luke Howard, and of course I think many of us were very excited that you got to play the Sydney International Jazz Festival at the Sydneycon this year. 10 Sales is currently playing downstairs in my living room, and I encourage everyone to have a look in Spotify and make sure that those the Spotify numbers keep going, creeping up way into the millions of streams. So can you tell me a little bit about your partnership with Luke and what's made it so successful, and you know, and how you met, and that kind of creative collaborative relationship you've got?
Sure. Well, Luke and I went to VCA together in Melbourne, so we're actually friends for a really long time, and we didn't actually play music together for the first, say, 15 years of our friendship. We would just hang out. We also were, you know, in different countries for you know, a lot of that time, but whenever I was back in Melbourne, you know, we would always make sure that, you know, we got to hang out. And I think it was just one of those times. He's like, "Oh, we should do a gig," you know, and so, you know, he turned up with a stack of charts, and I turned up, and we're like, these charts, they were so similar, like even the same chord progressions in the same keys. Like, we're like, wait, these bars are identical, you know. So we did this gig, and people are just like, I couldn't tell whose was whose, you know. So he was in he was living in Berlin for a while, and he said, oh, you know, just sort of offhand, and apparently he thought I would say no, but he's like, well, if you're in Europe, you know, anytime soon, you should come over and do an album. And I said, well, it just so happens I'll be there, like, you know, in 4 months or something on a tour. So I just stayed for an extra week and just popped to Berlin, and so we just rehearsed. We just had a Dropbox. We just like throw charts in for, you know, for 4 months or so. We just turn up and we just sort of workshop them. And then we got to the studio, and then we played. And what was amazing is that we had this wooden baffle between us, so we couldn't actually see each other, even though we're in the one room. And his piano had like an extra layer of felt, so and the mics are like really close, like, so you can hear the mechanics of the piano. So, and I had to play so softly, and it was just the hardest thing to do, you know, because trumpet's just so naturally loud, so it just takes so much energy just to sort of control the beast. so we just started playing, and even there was parts that it was cued, it was just perfectly in sync. I'm just like, this is sort of a little nuts, like this doesn't sort of happen. And even the engineer was like, oh, so how many records you've done together? We're like, oh, actually we've just done like one gig in like 15 years. So really the album was our second gig. And then we never bothered with the promotional side of things. We just sort of released it and just sort of like, we'll just let it go. And it's been 7 years, and it's just crazy. Like, we get letters, emails. We get emails. You know, from
like
people,
a letter, but
letters, digital letters.
Digital letters.
Digital letters.
Letters.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not like an owl turning up with a, that's
No,
nice.
that's right, yeah.
But one can hope. But yeah, but we just get these messages from people saying, I'm a poet, and I came across your music, and I've written some poetry, and here you go. Or like, I'm doing a film, and this is the inspiration. And it's just been really great that it's really sort of connected with so many people. Or like, you see people and they're trying, and English isn't their first language, but you see them they'd be like, I am crying, I am crying, I am crying, So that's it. I just almost feel like it's like a child or something. Like it's just like this little thing that has its own life. So it's fun to like watch it, go off. And I think we're on 8 million streams or something right now. So it's done quite well.
That's incredible. Well, hopefully with the power of the Women's Club, we'll push you up to 10 million streams.
That would be amazing.
See if we can actually, harness that.
Well, I do get 0.0027 cents every stream. So if you can just put it on loop.
Yeah, we'll just
put it on mute and put it on loop.
That's right. Done. I think we can all commit to that.
You basically buy me a coffee. Thank you.
And some cake, and then you'll find
yourself in
some situation. And that's how I got to Kenya. We'll see. So even though like we've got it on good authority, Nadje, that this screen that we see you on here really is that you're in Australia right now.
Yes.
How did you get back here?
I actually got rescued by my dear friend who was staying upstate. She had a cabin. It's actually Laurie's partner. Has this beautiful cabin in the woods, basically in upstate New York. And so the first week of the lockdown, the first week of everything just going absolutely bananas in New York, she drove 3.5 hours and came and picked me up, which I think might be one of the nicest things that anyone has ever done for me. But I thought I would stay up there for 2 weeks, and I was there for 7 months. So I had to order a couple more t-shirts.
Yeah,
I had to.
Yeah.
And so I ended up just ordering more stuff, microphones and such to teach and record and things. So I just basically moved my life up there. And then after a while, I'm like, well, if I can be anywhere and still working, might be nice to like see my family. So it took 3 canceled flights, but I finally, and it was just like 6 a.m. I was like trying to grab one, and I had just like I just like left my lease. I'd given them notice that I was leaving, and I'm like, oh great, now I don't have a place, but I also don't have a flight. So, but thankfully it worked out. So I arrived last December. And so I'm leaving in November. So it's been a beautiful year. Very, very lucky to be here.
Well, it's been amazing to catch this slice of time with you as you sort of come back and, reacquaint yourself with your childhood home and the quirks of parents, which I think we all can relate to, definitely.
Absolutely.
So you've got an album coming out in September, and what's it called?
It's called Golfos, which is this incredible Icelandic waterfall. I took myself for a little vacation for my 40th. And just was absolutely blown away by the landscape in Iceland. And so when I came back, I'm like, okay, got to write some music about it. And so I just hit record on my voice memo on my phone, and then just improvised something on the piano, and then wrote it out, and that became the title track. So it's sort of this very grand, sort of cinematic piece. The album was actually recorded live in Switzerland. There was like a promoter that saw a gig that I did with my quintet in the Village, and he kept asking me to come to Europe. And then finally he's like, well, do you want to come to Europe and record a live album that goes straight to vinyl? And I'm like, yes. So that came out 2 years ago. It's part of a box set on Nouvelle Records, and so I got the masters earlier this year. So I'm releasing it digitally on my label.
That's amazing. Well, I know that we'll all be looking out for that. And also we're right on time because I promise all the artists that they get to go and have dinner and have a martini on me and relax now that you've done your final bit of work for the day. Nadia, thank you so much for sharing your story. What I love about it is that there's a lot of chance in there. There's a lot of generosity. There's lots of leaps of faith. There's a lot of bravery. There's a lot of not being beaten by the man, and also not being worried about sort of male dominated spaces. And what's wonderful about you, and that I know as a person, that you have this wonderful joy that you just bring to every room that you're in. And it was such a lovely thing to be able to connect with you this evening and to hear more about your practice. We'll be wishing you well in November, but hopefully we'll get to see you again soon. But thank you for the chat tonight, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. Thank